We acknowledge the Gadigal people of the Eora Nation, the traditional custodians of this land.
As one of the oldest living cultures on Earth, we celebrate their age-old connections to country, along with the knowledge, determination, patience and generosity of all First Nations people, past and present.
This is Aboriginal land.
This episode is in loving memory of Shanti's beautiful mum, Veronica, who recently passed away after complications with leukemia.
We wanted to start this episode by talking about Lifeblood, who works nationally with donors, communities and healthcare providers to give life-giving donations for life-changing outcomes.
It's estimated that almost half of Australians will face a cancer diagnosis by the age of 85. And although many of us know someone with cancer, we may not realise how essential blood products are in their treatment.
For instance, one leukemia patient may need up to 9 units of red cells or 36 units of platelets each month. This means that one bag relies on several donors.
The impact of donating blood goes beyond numbers. It is saving lives. Currently, 33,000 blood donations are needed each week to keep up with demand, yet only 3% of eligible Australians are donating.
If you are aged 18 to 75 and feeling well, you may be eligible to donate, and each donation has the power to save up to 3 lives.
Booking a donation is easy. Just call 13 14 95, visit lifeblood.com.au or go to the Donate Blood app.
Your act of giving could be the lifeline someone needs to get through their toughest moment. Let's help make a difference together. Just a little trigger warning here that this episode contains themes of death and grief, and we do discuss the mourning period. And if this episode is not for you at this time, we encourage you to step away. You can always revisit it later.
Hi, I'm Lucille McCart.
And I'm Chantelle Otten. We're from Bumble, and this is Give Me a Buzz.
From first dates to heartbreak, we can all relate to and continue to learn from the ups and downs of modern dating and relationships.
We're here to give you the inspiration, motivation, and education to thrive in whatever dating fairy tale or dilemma you find yourself in.
Yes, so we're here today with the hosts of the Good Mourning podcast, Sal and Im. Hello.
Welcome.
Hi, thanks for having us.
So before we get into it, we ask all of our guests 2 quickfire questions. First is, what is your opening move? In life, in dating, in anything? How do you break the ice?
We were laughing about this because I've been with my husband for nearly 10 years. So I was like, I actually can't remember, like, dating-wise. But I reckon probably something like, what's your deepest trauma?
Yeah, that's a good one.
Hey.
Or let's just get it all out straight away.
Yeah. Or favourite dog breed. It'd be one of the two.
That's a really good one. Yeah.
First off, I thought it was like, what's your opening move? Like, what do you do, like, on a first date? And I was going to say, I put my hand on my now partner's hand on the first date straight away. So I made the first move there, and we've been together ever since.
Good.
But my opening move would be, I think, like, what's your coping mechanism when shit hits the fan?
Oh my God, that's such a good one.
Great question.
Yeah.
Great question. Because that kind of needs to be compatible, you know, if your coping mechanism is to, like,
Or healthy, at least. It has to be
Yeah, it has to
healthy.
be healthy.
It's not like,
Ideally.
I go into a rage or like I spend thousands of dollars online shopping, you know?
Yeah.
That would be Sal.
Behind those things.
Been there, babe. Been there, babe.
And the second one is, what is the worst dating advice you've ever received? And how can we counter it?
Someone told me to give a really toxic ex a second chance, and that was terrible advice because my fingers got well and truly burnt by doing that.
Yeah.
That was definitely a bad one. What about you, Im?
Mine would be advice around, like, playing the game, like not texting them and waiting. And I just feel like you're just setting yourself up for game playing.
Yes.
So I'm all about, like, just putting yourself out there. Send the first text. Who cares?
Yeah, I completely agree. Well, we're here today to talk about grief, obviously, and in particular about grief and dating and relationships and how that affects, you know, all the different parts of your life. And you two obviously have your podcast. There's a lot that we want to ask you about. But firstly, why don't you just give us a quick overview of
Give us a
your
411.
stories.
Tell us a bit more about you.
Oh, I love talking about our story. Okay, so Im and I both lost our mums suddenly. I was 33 when my mum died in November 2019 from a sudden seizure, and I had to go back to the UK and sort all of her estate out, and it was a time, like it was such a time, and I didn't expect to lose my mum at such a young age, and it was really lonely because a lot of my peers, even though they were like trying to support me, and a lot of my mates were being really supportive, because they hadn't experienced a loss and a grief of that level, didn't really know what to do or say. And so I really wanted to find someone who understood what I was going through and who I could share really openly. And I know we'll get into it in the conversation about all of the things that come with grief, but it's all consuming and it can be such a shock. And so I ended up finding a online group, a Facebook group run by Motherless Daughters Australia.
Yes, I've been following them recently.
Yes.
Really, really good.
Yeah. They're a really, really good organisation. And they have a Facebook group. One of the members organised a meetup, and that's where I met him. But I very nearly didn't go because I felt so self-conscious. I was like, I've got mates. I don't need to go to a support group meetup. This is a bit weird for me. But I also really felt that I needed to meet someone who understood and who got it. I'll handball it to you now, mate.
Yeah, well, I also nearly didn't go. It's
a bit of a sliding doors moment, isn't it? We
really
could have totally almost not met, really.
I know, but I feel like our mums wouldn't have allowed that.
That's fake.
So yeah, I was 32.
Yeah.
I have to go back now. I was 32 years old when my mum died by suicide, and it was a huge shock. She didn't struggle with any previous mental health conditions. So yeah, it just was completely out of the blue. She was in a domestically violent relationship, which I didn't know at the time. And yeah, there's a lot of emotional abuse going on there. So it was really, really hard. And I had a 9-month-old baby at the time. So I was trying to juggle being a new mum myself and then lost my mum in this catastrophic way. So it was a really, really hard time. And like Sal, I felt lonely and isolated in my grief, even though I was well supported by my friends and family. It's just still one of those things that you don't get until it's happened to you. And so yeah, I ended up going along to this support group meetup, which I very nearly backed out of at the 11th hour. And I'm so glad that I didn't, because that's where I met Sal, and we didn't actually even talk to each other the day that we met. Like, it was weird. We kind of went around a big table. There were 10 women there, and we all talked about how we lost our mums, and Sal ended up sitting across the table from me, and she said she lost her mum suddenly as well, and I just felt like an instant connection with her. I also thought she looked very cool. I was like, she's my cup of tea.
Slay.
Yeah. And so I stalked her on Facebook after the event and slid into her DMs, and the rest is history.
Hang on, so you made the first move?
I did.
Yeah.
I love making the first move.
Okay, we love that.
Yeah.
We did. And we became friends, and we talk about how wild it was that we all experience grief. Literally no one is exempt from this human experience, yet people don't know what to say to you, and you don't know what is happening to you because we're not educated on it, and people just don't talk about it.
It's very awkward.
Yeah.
Super awkward.
Yeah.
And we found that there weren't as many resources in Australia that spoke about grief in just a really conversational way, and just a bit of humour, a bit of lightness, relatable, I guess modern, really.
Just say it's shit.
Yeah.
I just want to hear it's just shit.
Because there's the 5 stages of grief, but they were designed for people who are in long-term illnesses who are going to pass away.
Stuff.
Oh, I'm a therapist. Yeah. So so as you all know, my mum passed away 2 weeks ago. So I have deep dived into what are we learning now? What's a modern way of talking about grief? Because the 5 stages actually don't apply when there's also sudden death as well. Yes. And I think it's all such an individualized experience. And I know from you as well. Yeah. So Lucille and I are best friends, for context too. And Lucille has been, one of my number one supporters throughout this time, because you just don't know. Every day you wake up and you're like, I'm not angry, and I don't know what I am today. It's just such a flowy experience. But one of the main things that we've discussed together is people coming up to you with these kind of wide eyes, or talking to your loved ones and being like, how do I talk to What do I say to Chantelle?
What do I say?
La, 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 la.
It's interesting because we were saying earlier, we came up with the idea to do this podcast after I lost my best friend 2 years ago. And as someone who's single and dating, I thought it would be really interesting to talk about like something that is a kind of hard thing to navigate in relationships. And when we first were talking about it, like 2 years ago felt really recent to me. And we were talking about like Chantelle supporting me through an episode like this. And then in that time, you know, Chantelle has lost her mum really recently. So do you want to talk about your mum a little bit?
Oh, yeah. Okay. So my mum had leukemia. So she was diagnosed 6 months ago and has been very, very healthy until about a month ago, or probably 6 weeks ago now. And she was going to go get a bone marrow transplant, but she'd stopped chemo for 2 months because her bone marrow wasn't producing any cells. And that means that the doctors thought it wasn't actually producing the cancer anymore either. It had been wiped out due to previous chemo. And then they did a biopsy and found that the cancer had grown by 50% in 2 months. So they're like, okay, change of plans. You can't get your bone marrow transplant. You have to go in for intense chemo. This was on the 11th of September. She went in for about 2 weeks, and, you know, I was spending time with her. I was so grateful to spend time with her because my mum was very much a let's talk about you person. She never really spoke about herself too much. But the time in hospital was
that
really
quality.
Yeah, I think like
just interested in other people. It's not just a deflection, it's also an interest in the people around her.
Yeah, she was very, very curious, very giving. But the last month we got to speak through like fears and what we want for my life and what she's going to do when she gets better, because the plan was she was going to get better. And then everything just she went into ICU because she got pneumonia and a blood infection and a viral infection. You know, like it just was going wrong, and she needed, you know, a lot of care that you can only get really from a daughter. I've got 2 brothers and an older sister as well. My older sister's intellectually disabled though. So I was one of the people that was mainly caring for her. And when I left my mum the last time that she was well, it was 3 days before she passed. They took her out of ICU and she was great. And then I took a day off caring for her because I was exhausted. And then the day after that, my dad called and said, your mum's going to pass away in the next hour. You need to come in. And then I got in there and her organs had failed and she couldn't see anymore. She couldn't speak. And she had, you know, she was like yellow and purple. And it was like, okay, she's going on to her next journey. And my siblings were able to get in there, and I was able to hold my mum as she passed away and started her next phase. And I think from there, it's just you go straight into funeral planning, and then you go straight into taking care of the people who've come over for the funeral, because my family's European. And then you go back to like life again, and you think, okay, the role changes that you go through, everything that you wanted before changes now. Do I still want those things? Like, you know, do I still want to go overseas next year for extended periods? All of that is stuff that we've been kind of considering. But the emotional roller coaster, and for me, very importantly, learning to be more vulnerable, because that's a really hard thing for me to do because I just struggle with it.
I think we probably have a lot of different perspectives here and also a lot of different timelines that everyone is sort of on. You know, my best friend, her name was Rachel, was also like very sudden when we lost her. I really relate, and I'm sure you can too, to that feeling of just like everything feels very turned around in this like immediate stage. But you obviously have both experienced that kind of profound grief. And from my personal experience, Chantelle's personal experience, the way that people react and respond to you, you can kind of tell straight away who has experienced grief and who hasn't by the way that they are able to engage with you. What, if anything, do you think is like the most collective experience that comes out of this?
Firstly, we're so sorry. Like 2 weeks is so fresh, and I just think it's amazing that you're here right now. Like I think you're incredible for showing up today, because 2 weeks is fresh, and it's it's bloody hard, and I think it's all consuming, grief is. And I think one of the most common things that we hear from our community and that we experienced as well is that it's lonely. And even if you've got loads of friends and your family and a support network, if you feel like your experience isn't being understood by others, or maybe your family are grieving differently to you, or your partner's grieving differently, it can be really isolating. And like people, like you just said earlier, like people don't know what to say. There's this wide-eyedness or this kind of hush, like, do we mention it? Or some people just ignore it, you know. Some people just don't even bother. They're just like, nah, not dealing with that. So it's very isolating, and it can come as a shock, especially if you're a well-supported person who has never really felt loneliness before. I think I would say that is one of the most common things that we hear from people time and time again. And it's because as a society, we just don't talk about it. We don't know how to support around grief, which we're hoping that our work is going to change that. But a lot of people feel misunderstood because of that. And then maybe just kind of just retreat inwards because they feel like they don't have an outlet to talk about what they're experiencing.
Yeah, I think I never really identified with like being sad. You know, I think that like when you, like I obviously was sad, but I think when you encounter a lot of people, they expect you to be this like sad, can't get out of bed kind of person. And that I just didn't experience it in that way. And the thing about Rachel, my friend, is she had this like really brilliant sense of humor. Like her and I, our mutual friends, you know, we were laughing and like making jokes. And like that was really important to us to be able to like talk about her in that way. But you could tell like probably people that weren't as close probably thought we were crazy if we're like laughing and like making jokes. But you kind of have to be able to be yourself, you know?
Yes.
Yeah, and the grieving styles is probably quite a good one here.
Yeah. Well, I was just going to say as well, like, I love that you brought up that, you know, sadness wasn't like a really prevalent emotion for you in grief, because there is a huge misconception that grief is just sadness. Like if you look up grief in the dictionary, it just says it's intense sorrow. It's like, where are the other 600 emotions that we can feel, including joy?
Yeah.
Which I know you had experiences with, you know, going back and seeing all your friends from home, you have moments of joy and then you judge yourself. You're like, oh, I should be feeling something different now. And like, I was just full of rage. Like I was so angry and I got stuck in that stage of grief for a very long time. So glad that they've been debunked now. But yeah, grief doesn't look like what society tells us it should look like. And then when we are experiencing all of the other things, we judge ourselves and we think that we're doing it wrong when there really is no right or wrong way to do it. But the grieving styles is a really interesting one because we both lost our mum suddenly, similar time frame. And the way that we grieved was wildly different, wasn't it?
Yeah, so like So I had to go back and sort all out, like my mum's estate out, plan the funeral. And so kind of on one hand, I didn't really have much of a choice. I had to do that because my brother is also intellectually disabled. So he wasn't able to help me. But I also thrived, I think, on having something to do. And I was kind of in shock and I had the adrenaline. But also I was kind of like, I just went into PR mode and I was just like.
I can relate to that.
Yeah, I was just like, Google spreadsheet, grieving via a to-do list, basically.
Yeah.
Like I obviously felt sad and I was like, you know, overcome with grief. And when I stopped, I'd really feel it. But I think also that helped me. That was my kind of way. And then we learned about the grieving styles. And there's the instrumental griever, which is more my style, which is basically people who find it helpful being practical. So maybe like you, Lucille, maybe doing is, you know, whereas you were very much more like, feelings, you had to verbalize your feelings, didn't you? And you found
so emotional.
difficult to do the practical stuff. Whereas I thought I was an emotional robot because I was kind of like cracking on.
Yeah. I couldn't when it came to like the funeral planning or anything practical. Like I was absolutely useless. All I wanted to do was curl in a ball and just feel whatever it was that I was feeling in the moment and talk about it constantly. But like, how did we become like best friends at that time in our lives? Like we were at our worst and we met each other like in the depths of hell, it felt like, and somehow our relationship blossomed out of that place, which I love.
It's hard though, don't you find, when there's like something positive happening in your grief journey. And that's because I had a lot of similar experiences where I was like, well, I don't want to say that something good came of this because my first choice would be for this not to have happened.
Yeah.
You know, so I had a really complicated relationship with the good things that happened in my life afterwards.
And like, there's no such thing as a bad emotion in grief because we feel so many, even like envy.
Yeah.
You know, envy is really common. We talk about it in our book because like you can feel envious of other people who like still have a mum or still have their best friend, and then you feel bad about it. It's like, oh, I'm not this kind of person. Like I don't normally feel those sorts of emotions, but so many things can come up.
Yeah, and it's funny as well when people talk about like the triggers that like things that trigger your grief. Like for me, you know, people always put a trigger warning on like a mention of, you know, this or that. And I'm like, I'm actually, if people talk about death or death of a friend, that's not the kind of thing that triggers me. Driving down the street and seeing a group of girls like sitting at a lunch or like on a sunny day, like outside, like doing things together that are like around my age, that's the kind of thing that reminds me that I don't have my friend, you know. And I think people tread so carefully around you in that early stage, but it's like, I can talk about what happened, but the thing that's going to like knock me around isn't the things that you might think.
So true.
Yeah.
Like I still struggle to sit next to, if I'm in a cafe or somewhere and there's a group of women who would have been my mum's age.
Yeah.
Like that's what gets me, because I just think that like that,
she should be doing something like that.
Yeah. It's not like a podcast episode that might talk about it. Do you know?
Yes,
So I
exactly.
can relate to that.
Yeah. You were both in relationships when you experienced grief, but you have an enormous community that you've amassed, and you also do a lot of interviews. From your single listeners or like single guests that you've had on, what have you heard from them is like one of the struggles to be dating when you've experienced grief?
So many struggles.
I know. I'm like, I could
Where
answer
do
this
we
question.
I definitely think you should contribute to this.
Yeah.
Because you've also been like figuring it out as you go.
Yeah, I think that for me, it was in the kind of stage that like you're at that first sort of 6 months, it was like, if I'm going on a first date with someone, do I tell them, because I was like not myself. I was like up and down all over the place. Like on my first date, like my best friend died.
Rip the Band-Aid off.
My best friend just
Which I definitely did once or twice, and it just did not.
Kill the mood.
It really kills the mood.
Pardon the pun.
Exactly, yeah. Just none of the people that I was dating in that first 6 months, none of that worked out anyway. So I didn't have to worry about it because I was making weird choices. But that was kind of the biggest thing for me, is if you're like meeting new people and you know you're not yourself.
Do you tell them that if you're tender?
Because I also was like, am I going to go back to the person that I was before? Is this way I'm feeling now permanent? Or is there like a third option in the future that's like a mesh of both things?
Totally. And something that we hear like from a lot of our community, and something that we experience as well, and you guys might be able to relate, is this feeling of like life is split in two. There's like the before and the after, and you don't feel like the same person. And I think as well, when we experience a loss of someone close, like our self-esteem can be impacted, and that's what we hear from a lot of our single listeners, is like you just said, Lucille, like you don't really feel like yourself. Like, you know, you kind of almost want to be like, hey, this isn't how I normally am. I'm just grieving, you know, I promise I'm like, you know, I used to be a little bit different, but you are like different because something massive has happened to you. And I think for a lot of our single listeners, it's that feeling of putting yourself out there, but also feeling like unsure of yourself because, you know, we're relational beings, aren't we? And if you've lost somebody who's played a huge part in your life and was a big part of your support circle, then that can really have a knock. So that's quite a common one, isn't it?
Yeah, and we interviewed Megan Devine, who wrote the incredible book, It's Okay That You're Not Okay.
Oh, I'm reading that right now.
Oh, are you? It's
amazing.
a great book.
Yeah.
And she explained to us like humans are relational beings. So when you lose someone that's close to you, it's like losing a mirror to yourself. You know, and that's such a huge shock for people.
Yeah.
I completely lost my sense of humour for a long time. And then you wonder, like, is this me forever now? Am I forever changed like this? And I do think grief does change you. I do think I'm not the same person I was, you know, at that marker of time, like before Mum died. I'm very different, but little parts of me came back. Like, I think I'm pretty funny now, no? Like, it did creep back in, you know, those things that you think are never going to come back.
It comes back in a different way, though.
In a different way. I'm probably a bit more morbid. Like,
the sense of humour has gone a bit twisted.
Darker,
It's
you have
so
to
dark.
be. It's so dark. Yeah. But
yeah, you don't feel like yourself. You are different, and so it's like you were saying, Lucille, it's coming to terms with the new version of you. You're trying to figure that out. Then you're also trying to put yourself out there and build a connection, but you're not quite. It's shaky ground, right? It's shaky ground, and I think as well the physical elements, like you're exhausted, you've got brain fog, like so. There's all of that that's happening as well, and that's something that's so common that a lot of our listeners struggle with, and a lot of people don't even realise that brain fog is related to grief. They just think that they've changed.
There's a lot of things that it took me maybe getting to like 12 months in to realise, oh, that was not just something weird I was doing or something that was wrong with me. That was a grief symptom. Yeah. Like for the first probably 6 months, I could go to work, I could do all of these things. I could not cook a meal. Like my executive function for like basic tasks, like I was just buying pre-made food or like it, and I was just didn't really connect with the fact that like my executive function was being impaired in that kind of way.
Do you think it's also good to say to people, if you're single, you're dating, or even if you're in a relationship, to do what you spoke about, saying what your emotion is. So today I'm feeling good today. Like actually like letting people know I'm pretty sensitive today, or I'm a bit shaky, or I don't know how I feel. I feel like nothing, you know, or I'm fucking raging today. Like I'm like so
I'm
raging.
On the
Yeah. I think that could be a really helpful thing, but it also has to take the person that you're dating to come up with strategies on how they can relate to you and how they can help and support you through that process. You know, I guess if you're single and on an app saying, I'm going through a really terrible time right now, so some days are going to be a little different. Some days I'll be responsive, some days I will not, or I need to take a break from you. Let's revisit this in, you know, a couple of months when I'm feeling like I'm actually want to have fun dating. So. Yeah.
How were your romantic relationships changed by your experience?
In every way. Yeah.
Because a lot of people break up.
We came very close, like I'll be honest.
Like a lot of relationships end when one partner has experienced profound grief. Yeah. And you're both still with your partners.
You were pushed. Yes. I think it was so tough. And we had a baby as well. So like that strain on a relationship on its own, you know, a baby that didn't sleep was enough.
And then the pandemic.
Yeah. Oh my gosh.
And then, so then there was like, we were both kind of stuck at home with the baby, and then throw on top traumatic grief. And then all of my partner's family are in the UK. So we had like barely any support. Yeah. It really tested us. And I think what I identified with was, so my mum was my emotional support. She was my go-to person. I'd call her like 5 times a day. I was so like in a really codependent relationship with her, which I now can see it probably wasn't very healthy. But when she died, I put all of that expectation onto my partner. So I was like, you need to be that emotional support for me. Why aren't you cuddling me why aren't you picking up the cues when I just need a hug? I don't need solutions. I don't need you to tell me like, you know, what I need to do to like get through this moment. I just want a fucking hug, or I just want you to say something comforting that my mum would say. Like she would always know exactly what to say because she knew me so well.
Yeah.
And so I was putting all of that pressure onto my partner, and then he wouldn't give me what I needed in the moment. So then I'd just be like, oh, well, you know, you can't give me what I need. You don't know how to support me through this. And then that was putting pressure on him because he was grieving too. And I don't think I really acknowledged that when I was deep in it, because it was like we had arguments sometimes about, he'd be like, oh, well, I'm grieving too. I'll be like, yeah, but it was my mum. Like, as if my grief is worse than his. You know, it was like a bit of competitive griefing going on.
And it is, but it isn't at the same time.
Yeah. But I think he wanted his grief to be acknowledged, whereas I'm not the right person to be doing that because, I lost my mum. So I did a lot of therapy. And I had a really great therapist who told me once, she's like, you need to lower your expectations. And it was really simple advice, but it honestly saved our relationship because I was expecting so much from him and he just wasn't able to fill the role of my mum and be all of those things financially providing because I couldn't go back to work at the time. Like I was so traumatized. And so that saved us, just letting him off the hook a bit and being like, all right, he's not going to be able to show up for me in the emotional ways that I need, but he is doing all of these other really amazing things to support me and my family right now. So trying to shift the negative thinking into like a bit more positive thinking and finding the things that he is doing good for us in the moment really helped. But yeah, it shook us up a lot.
Yeah. I think that the fact that you're both still with your partners is probably more unusual than it is. This episode is brought to you by Bumble. We know making the first move on dating apps can be a little bit daunting.
Luckily, Bumble's opening moves feature makes it super easy to get the conversation going straight away.
Shanti, what's your opening move? I already know it's going to be a little bit flirty.
Well, mine is tell me something that you're passionate about. What about you?
Oh, mine is what's your favourite thing you've learned from TikTok?
I love it. So on Bumble, you can either write your own opening move or choose from one of the many suggestions and then sit back and wait for your matches to come to you.
This is your sign to download the app and date on your terms. Find Bumble in the App Store or on Google Play. I really love the episode that you did about attachment styles and how they can be sort of heightened when you're grieving. I know that quite a few of your episodes have also touched on friendship breakdowns, and I want to know why you think that is, other than the sort of explanation that people that have experienced grief get it and people that haven't can't understand it. But is there more to it than that, do you think?
I think a lot of it comes down to kind of back to what we were talking about, how like grief can change you. I think sometimes what you look for in a friendship might be different when you are grieving or you've experienced something, you know, that's changed your view of life or has been, you know, a little bit traumatic. So it can be in part, I think, people not knowing what to say or feeling uncomfortable and not showing up for you, and then that might alter the friendship, and new people might come into your life like Em and I, people who understand what you're going through, or you might seek that out. Something that like has really helped me, and we talk about it in our book, is we call it the friendship buckets. It was actually coined by Aristotle, so we can't claim this theory.
Damn it.
He's not going to come after us.
Definitely hope not.
I don't think there's any copyright on.
You can say friendship bowls. I don't know. Friendship jars.
I mean, he didn't coin buckets. Let's be honest. It was a bit more
you
like
coined buckets.
profound than that, wasn't he?
Yeah, his was like friends of virtue or something.
Yeah.
Some shit. Ours is like buckets.
Okay.
But basically, that like if you can put people in different buckets and have a look at like, some people might be in the emotional support one. They might be fantastic. They might be, you know, exactly what you need. They might sit with you and hold space and ask you how you're feeling.
They're rare, by the way.
Pretty rare. Yeah. And then you've got your like more practical friends. So they might be the ones like us that, you know, got the Excel out or can help you find a really good probate solicitor or help you arrange the funeral. And then there's the more social mates who might be, they might not be emotional support, they might be rubbish at being practical, but they're going to take you for a beautiful meal and make you feel really good when you need it, or, you know, take your mind off it. And I think often because we think about grief being so emotional, we expect everyone to be emotional support, and just that's just not everyone's strength, right? Yeah. And I think it can help in friendships and in dating to kind of realize that people have different strengths that they play to. And
what do I need right now?
Yeah, and then making sure that you've got, I guess, an equal amount of what you need from your support circle.
Do you think it's good to tell your friends what bucket that they're sitting in?
Yeah, can you tell them that they're the social friend?
Because I was talking about this with, you know, two of my best friends said to me in Melbourne, like, I think I've got like 500 unread text messages and then I don't ever answer the phone. So they're like, how do we support you? And I was like, what does Lucille do? What does blah, blah, blah do? And then I'm like, just FaceTime me, because I'm not going to answer your voice call because you can't see how I'm feeling there. I don't have energy or capacity to answer a text message. just video call me and then let's yap away or have a quick catch up, and then you can get a read on how I'm feeling that day and what I can do. And I think it's really important to check in on how are you feeling before you go on to like the conversation with the person that's grieving. How are you feeling today?
And I think as well, like asking if they want, like, do they just want you to listen or do they want solutions? Because I think often people feel like they've got to jump in and be like, try and fix it or come up with something. Actually, sometimes you just need to talk to them, right? And just let it out. So I think that can help as well.
This is also a podcast about dating and relationships. And you have a couple of episodes about grief and sex.
Yes.
Oh,
and we have a sexologist here with us right now.
Yeah, let's talk about it.
So let's go. Let's discuss.
I want you take the floor here. Go for it.
Well, for me personally, my libido was non-existent when I was grieving because you're in survival mode. Your body is not functioning in the way that it was before, and that it's different for everyone. But yeah, my personal experience was like, do not fucking touch me. Like,
Mine was the same.
And I was worried about thinking about my mum when we would do it. Like that was a thing.
I actually wondered if they could like
see us.
Yeah.
I have a video that I sent to a friend the other day saying, do you think our parents are looking down on us masturbating? Because like...
I think we did ask a psychic this, didn't we? One of the psychics.
Oh, we did.
I actually remember that episode that you're talking about where they were like, they're not there all the time. But it's so funny because my experience with Rachel, I'm like, she's would.
Definitely there.
That's the time she would show up.
She's loving it.
My mum would be like, oh, what's that toy? Did you have a libido?
Up and down.
Yeah.
Definitely not at the start. Like you don't really have like kind of the capacity for any of that. But I have like read stories and research that says like some people get like crazy horny.
Mm-hmm. Can be healing.
Yeah.
Sex can be very healing.
I don't know if you've heard of widow's fire.
No.
But like it's a term where a lot of widows feel like, they want to have sex. They feel like really horny. And it's, we actually spoke to a psychotherapist about it. And she was like, it boils down to the wanting to feel alive, Obviously as humans, we're born to like procreate, right? And so people kind of sometimes feel like they want to kind of give life and like, but yeah, that it's quite a common thing. But then other people might feel guilty because they might feel like they're,
I wonder if it relates to like the person in your life that you lost, because I imagine when it's your mum, that doesn't spark libido. But if it's like a romantic partner or a friend, there isn't that same association with like a parental figure. So I think it probably is possibly also connected to like the relationship that you had with the person you've lost.
And what type of sex you're having.
Yes.
I mean, you can't go like 2 weeks after, like, let's get the whip and chains out. Like, we're not going BDSM 2 weeks in.
Does this ever come up like in the clinic?
Yeah, it comes up all the time. I think that, and it comes up, it's kind of similar to parenting, having a new child. Like you're stepping into a new role in your life, and you're also confused about the new normal. And when you don't know what the new normal is, it's very hard because you actually kind of have to try the experience to see if you can lean in or whether it's just off the table for now. Yes. Right? Because like stress and sex don't mix. If you're going through a very stressful period, it's very, very hard and especially when you've lost someone, it's like you're living in a house where you've locked all the doors and the windows and you're just keeping yourself together. To open a door to let someone into your personal, most vulnerable state is extremely difficult because it's the vulnerability side of things that is opening up. And if you don't want to be vulnerable at that time because you're like, I've got too many things to do. I can't be vulnerable right now. And I just want to sleep. You get so tired as well when you're grieving. Like you just want to sleep a lot. I think if it's sex that's coming from a point of love and tenderness and care and just holding, and kind of you know, maybe it flows from just holding someone. I think that that's probably the most successful like stories that I've heard in clinic. Again, it's a really individualized approach though.
Yes, definitely. And I think for widows and widowers, like it's extra complicated when it comes to navigating sex or dating after loss. Like we've heard stories of people feeling all sorts of emotions when they're like masturbating over their partner who had died. And it's like, this feels so wrong, but they can't help it. And they just, or having sex with new people and all they can think about is their partner who had died. So it's a lot of emotions can come with it, like guilt, and it's really, really tricky terrain, especially for widows and widowers. But it's an important topic to talk about. But like it feels really taboo for people, but we don't want it to be. You know, it's all so normal. And
we got a big response though, didn't we, when we put it out to our community? Because I think it's one of those topics people want to be able to talk about.
They're like, please, I've been waiting to tell someone about this. Yeah,
like that's thinking or feeling these things. Like people just want their experiences to be validated. I think.
Yeah, I think that, you know, your podcast and your book has so many resources for people who are experiencing grief. To sort of wrap everything up, what advice would you give to people who aren't experiencing grief but who are either dating or in a relationship or a friendship with someone that is? Like, what is the one thing that you wish that you could tell people, whether it's like, don't be awkward about it, like rip the Band-Aid, send the message, you know, do whatever it is. Like, what is the thing that you think people need to know?
I think be patient because, you know, grief is exhausting and people might cancel plans if they just really, you know, we call them grief bombs, when it just all of a sudden you're feeling okay and then boom, the grief hits. And so have patience because they might cancel plans, or they might not bring their best self to your date or to your hangout, or they might be a bit snappy, or they might be just really teary, and they might not be what you were expecting them to be. You might have something really fun planned. So just have patience because it is all consuming and they just need support and time.
Yeah.
I would say acknowledge the loss. Like, don't be afraid to talk about it. Ask them questions about their person. Like, talk about it. You know, chapter 1 of our book is the elephant in the room, and we're really trying to stop grief and death from being that elephant in the room. It's something that we should be comfortable holding space for and talking about with people and not be so afraid to go there. I think in Western society we're just terrified of death or going near it, and that's why people are feeling really isolated because we're not getting the support that we should be getting, and especially from people who haven't experienced loss themselves. You know, we don't know what to say. We tiptoe around it. We say awkward platitudes like, oh, they wouldn't want you to be sad, or they've gone off to a better place, or things like that.
This place was good too.
Yeah,
this was better.
Talk about that person that you've lost, like who they actually were. Like they're like, they don't become an angel, you know, that like never wants anything bad for you, you know, like talk about them as they were, not as this like mystical sort of, you know, made up person now that they're gone. And also I think it's like understanding the timeline, because there are a lot of times I'm having this like, I'm like really angry about this situation, but no one's really understanding why, because like a month has passed and everyone else's life has gone back to normal, but like I'm only just starting to like process this. So it's like, don't hold people to a certain timeline as well.
Yeah, I mean, there is no timeline to grief, right? And the 5 stages, people who are grieving, one of the first things they do when they're Googling grief is find the 5 stages. And it's not meant for people who are grieving, it's meant for people who are facing the end of their life. But there is no other thing in the mental health space where we are working off, or people are making assumptions of something that was from the 60s. You know, and for some reason that model is still lurking and people still think that it applies to grief. And if you're supporting someone or dating someone, don't judge them and just understand that, you know, grief is always with us. It's much easier. As time goes on, it isn't all consuming, but it's still there, like, you know, because we love our people, right? So we're always going to miss them. And
Yeah. Is there anything else you want to add?
This might apply to your listeners, but it is really common as well for people who are grieving to want to throw themselves into dating and just as a bit of an escape too, or as a distraction from the pain. And so that is a really common experience that people do go through when they are grieving. So we have, heard that quite a bit from our community members, haven't they? And then they judge themselves for putting themselves out there so quickly. They feel like, is it too soon? Am I even ready? And
and I think that if you're doing that, if you're listening to this and you're currently doing that, I've definitely done that. It's actually totally fine as long as you're like making safe choices and like protecting yourself both like physically but also emotionally as well.
Like you were saying, like when you're grieving, it's kind of like that sacred space, and when you open that door a little bit, letting other people's energy in, when yours is so depleted, like you've got to be really careful who you do let in.
And dating is a very vulnerable experience. So if it's giving you an outlet, if it's making you enjoy life more, because sometimes going for a drink with someone that doesn't know you is kind of an amazing thing to do when everyone else in your life is asking you questions and, you just want to like blow up some steam, have some fun. But you have to be very mindful of the fact that you're in an emotionally vulnerable state. So you need to have that in mind when you're thinking about who you're dating as well.
Wow. What an episode.
Thank you so much. I think this has been like one of our best ones.
Yeah, thank you so much.
What an honour.
I hope this helps a lot of people.
Thank you.
Thank you for having us and for opening up the space to talk about grief.
Thank you. Thank you.
Two sets of besties. Love it.
And where can everyone find you that wants to hear more about you're on Instagram at Good Mourning Podcast?
Yep, at Good Mourning Podcast, Morning with You, and Good Mourning
Very clever
podcast.
name for the podcast, by the way.
Yeah, love it.
Yeah, everyone should buy the book, listen to the podcast.
Yeah, just find us on any podcast platform.
Yeah.
Thank you so much.
Thanks ladies.
Okay, now we're at the DM section of the podcast. Feel free to write in if you've got a question at Bumble_Australia. This week's DM, let's take a listen. I hear it's from Jamie.
Hi. Okay, I was just wondering, what is the nicest way to break it off with someone via text? Like, what do you say without coming across too mean?
First and foremost, you don't have to be mean when you're breaking up with someone. It's like, please don't be mean when you're breaking up with someone.
Not every
via
breakup
text.
needs to go down in flames.
No, and I think like, when you're breaking up with someone, there's obviously reasons for it, but I honestly don't really think it's super necessary to tell them all the things that they've done wrong.
Let's take a step back. When is it okay to break up with someone via text?
When you're not seeing them for a very long time, when you haven't kind of...
Like 3 dates or less?
Yeah.
Yeah, like I think if you've been on more than 3 dates with someone and you've like got a bit of a, thing going, a text is a bit of a...
I would even say 2 potentially.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I think it's like kind of the language that we would use is more of like a sandwich model. So you give them an affirmation. I've had a really great time getting to know you. You're a wonderful person. And then you give the kind of feedback. I just don't feel like we have the spark that I need for my future romantic relationship. I wish you all the best. It's been a great time getting to know you.
I'm not feeling enough of a connection is kind of all you need. You don't need to be, these are all the reasons why I don't like you.
Absolutely not. Absolutely not. I think it's just like at the end of the day, not everyone is compatible.
Yeah.
So you just say, you know what, I'm not feeling enough of a connection here to keep pursuing this. And I've had a really great time with you and I wish you the best.
Yeah. But also, if you've been on more than 2 or 3 dates, like you might have to front up to a phone call or a face-to-face conversation and same sentiment, but, not everything has to be a mean, we're going to burn this down.
No.
We hate each other now.
It could also be a great time to explain where you're at in your dating journey and what you're looking for as well. And just be like, I'm looking for this and I just feel like we're not quite aligned here on ABC.
I think, in a relationship, a breakup shouldn't really come as a surprise because you should be communicating to people about your feelings throughout. But in a casual dating scenario, you don't really owe anyone a lengthy explanation about what you want and how you're feeling. As long as you're treating them with kindness and being clear and giving them clarity. That's really all you need to do.
Yeah. So good luck with that one.
Good luck, Jamie.
All right. Thanks for listening in. Oh, my goodness.
it.
What an episode.
Got questions, got feedback, send us a message at Bumble_Australia.
And make sure that you listen to the Good Mourning team. So at Good Mourning Podcast, because we loved them.
We love Sal and Em. Give them a follow. And if you like us,
give us a follow. Yes. Tap the bell. Leave us a very positive review. Only
5
positives
stars only.
allowed.
Thank you. And we'll see you next week.
See you there.
Bye.